Morning, it's Monday, March 21st, and we're going to be doing our daily weather briefing for this week. And we've got a little bit of a warm up taking place in the Central Plains, and we've got a possibility of some severe weather while the Southwest remains pretty dry. So let's take a look at our current weather and get right into it. Right now, mostly the eastern portion and western portions of the United States are centered with precipitation, while the rest of the United States is pretty clear. So let's take a look at the west here. We've got a storm system that has passed into the Intermountain West and pretty much anywhere from Montana to the west coast there. We've got some scattered showers and snow showers, especially along the coastal region here, as we've got a storm system that's pushing in off the Pacific coast here with some decent to light to moderate rain along the coast, and then some snow up in the mountains there. Temperatures generally in the 40s and 50s in that area. Looking in the southwest and most of the rest of the central plains, temperatures are relatively nice. We'll begin to see a pretty decent warm up here in the central plains after some very cool weather that moved in there later last week. Temperatures range from a pretty balmy 72 all the way up to about 30 degrees up here in Montana around Minot. And there is a polar front up to the north in Canada that will be dipping into this northeast a little bit today, but I expect it to stay north of the northern tiers of the state of the country for now. Now, if we go into the central and southeastern portion of the United States, again, not much going on in the Midwest or in the southeastern portion. Skies are generally clear. Temperatures were quite cool early this morning, but we're beginning to see that moderate a little bit today as high pressure pretty much dominates this area. But in the northeast, we've got quite a bit of snow falling in Maine at this point in time, with temperatures still around 21 to 30 degrees. So they're still fighting winter out in the northeast, and there's some snow showers and some light rain showers coming off the lakes there as the northwest flow aloft pushes some lake effect generated precipitation because of the warmer temperatures of the lakes at this point in time. But in generally, the weather at this point in time is not too bad across the United States. So let's take a look at the watch warning map. As you can tell, this is quite colorful today. So let's start in the west. In the northwest portion, there's not much activity, but there is quite a bit of activity along the California coast and inland. There's some winter weather advisories and some high surf advisories, as well as some wind advisories and some fire weather watches in effect, especially once we get into the southwest, where there's a lot of dry conditions. Even though the Intermountain West has, and especially the northern Intermountain West, has had a lot of precipitation this year, above normal, a lot of the Southwest has been remained dry this year. So they're now beginning to move into the fire danger as we get into more windier conditions, as storm systems that move in on the Pacific carry less precipitation across these areas. And so now we have a large area of fire weather watches that extend all the way from Arizona into the Central Plains. We do have a winter weather advisory and a winter storm watch now in effect for portions of northwest Colorado and portions of southeast Wyoming, and then some winter weather advisories, and then some red flag warnings that are in effect for Nebraska, parts of New Mexico, Kansas, and South Dakota and Iowa. We still have the flash flood advisories again for 2 weeks ago when we had those heavy rains in the southeast. Those will continue for a while. Winter storm warning watch in effect for portions of east central portions of Michigan. And then a lot of cold air that has settled in. We've got frost advisories, freeze warnings in effect for the southeast here. And so a lot of, just a reminder down there that there's still some cold air still in play here. And then some winter storm watches and warnings, winter weather advisories here for Maine, but those will be dissipating later on today as the storm system pulls out of. And then some red flag advisories for most of Florida here, as well as some fire weather watches too as the dry conditions continue down there. Let's look at the eastern satellite. As you can see, pretty much clear skies across most of the United States, just a little bit of some cloudiness associated with the northwest flow and some moisture that's getting caught up from the lakes there. So we got some lake effect snow in western portions of New York and Pennsylvania into Ohio, and some effects of in Michigan, but most of the storm system is still on Maine here, but the rest of the United States is pretty much clear and dry. Looking at the west side, we have a decent storm system coming into the west coast here. That'll be digging a little bit further south. So there's a lot of precipitation that'll be happening out through this day, mostly from about Monterey northwards. We'll see most of the precipitation in the next 24 hours to 36 hours. So but the southwest remains clear and dry at this point in time. And then looking at our current radar, as you can see, again confirms the fact that we have most of the precipitation along the western portion of the United States, a little bit of precipitation in Idaho, and then some scattered pockets of some precipitation throughout the Intermountain West. And then we have to go a long distance to get to more precipitation, which is, again, we talked about that lake effect snow and some showers off the lakes there, but most heaviest snow right now at this point is in Maine, but that'll be winding down throughout the rest of the day. Looking at the severe weather analysis for today, today is going to be pretty quiet. There's not a lot going across the United States as we saw on satellite. Pretty much high pressure dominating across most of the U.S. here. So we do have a general area of thunderstorm activity, mostly over the northwestern portion of the United States with that storm system that'll be pushing in later today. Quite dynamic. So we do expect some scattered thunderstorms with some isolated heavy wind reports, as well as some small hail that could be associated with some of those storms. But mostly in general, we expect most thunderstorms today to be below limits. However, as we get into day 3, we're looking at a slight risk of severe thunderstorms from around Springfield, Missouri, to Dallas, all the way over to Shreveport, up to Little Rock, and then a larger marginal risk all the way from Davenport, Iowa, to Springfield, all the way down to San Antonio, Texas, and southward, and then a general area of thunderstorms out from there. We'll talk about this a little bit later in our forecast, but we're not going to get in quite detail. And then looking at day 4, SPC has a severe weather outlook for portions of most of the northern 2/3 of Alabama, portions of Georgia, and portions of Tennessee and Mississippi. So we have a storm system that's going to be forming out here in the Central Plains and could potentially produce some severe weather. But looking at the parameters right now, things are not quite lining up. But we're still quite a ways out to determine that. Looking at the winds aloft right now, we do have a good southerly flow that's now beginning to form across Oklahoma and Kansas with a little weak southerly jet there, low-level jet of between 30 and 40 knots. Not a lot of moisture associated with that, and that's the reason why we have a lot of red flag and warnings and fire watches in effect, because a lot of that's coming off of dry land as the high pressure pretty much closed down the Gulf of Mexico. Looking at 300 or 850 millibars, again, we still see that low-level jet there, but again, it's pretty much dry at this level because it's coming out of the southwest, but we'll begin to see quite warmer temperatures throughout most of the U.S. Central Plains as temperatures increase quite rapidly in some of these areas. Looking at the 700 millibar, this is the flow in which weather travels pretty much. Strong onshore flow at this level off the Pacific, so that's the reason why I have that a lot of precipitation along the west coast here. But it's kind of interesting here. We're beginning to see kind of the patterns of I think summer beginning to show themselves. A lot of times you'll get to see little signs throughout spring of some summer weather patterns, and I think this week is kind of a sign of that to some extent. This is very conducive to very warm southwest and central plains, so we'll see some record highs broken this week, I think. Looking at the 500 millibar level, again, a pretty potent storm system with a strong jet undercutting it, coming into the northwest. Again, pretty diffluent flow here, so I definitely think we'll see some thunderstorms, but I don't think we'll see anything too severe at this point in time in the northwest. And then northwest flow aloft over the northeastern portion of the United States, pretty much keeping them pretty cool at this point in time. And then finally at 300 millibars, the jet stream level, we see a strong jet coming in off the Pacific around that low pressure system that's going to be moving in. And then a strong polar jet coming down, meeting the subtropical jet off the east coast there. A negative tilted trough there. But again, the snow will be decreasing as time goes on over the northeast here, as high pressure begins to dominate most of the southwest and central portion of the United States. Looking at our aviation weather, what's kind of surprising, most of the convection right now is in California with tops up to 25,000 feet, and then a general area of thunderstorms later today, but really over the rest of the United States, no convective segments expected to be at this point in time. In Turbulence not bad either. No turbulent segments at this point, but I expect some turbulence to be associated with the jet coming off the Pacific as well as in the Northeast. Some pretty strong winds aloft there around the upper little flight levels around between 25 and 30,000 feet. No icing at this point is a problem. And then looking at the freezing level, which we're adding at this point in time, anywhere from the southwest, the freezing level will be from about 13,000 feet to near the surface around the Gulf Lake, the lakes, the Great Lakes, as well as along the northeastern coast there, where that storm system is producing some snow at this point in time. So that's something to be alert about. Around the northwest, though, freezing levels will be around 3 to 5,000 feet. So expect some situations that might develop there. Now let's take a look at our 5-day forecast here. And again, I put in the model madness alert here because models, again, for the third week in a row are just all over the place. And it's hard to kind of find a really good general pattern except for the next 3 days in advance. But after that, it just kind of falls apart. So let's look at today at 18Z from the GFS run. And this is pretty good. I was looking at Friday's model when we did our last show, and it's pretty close here. Again, the storm system off the east will be pushing off the coast, so we expect a lot of precipitation to wane at that point in time. This high pressure pretty much dominates at the upper levels and lower levels. Low pressure system will be moving onto the west coast with some energy undercutting it at this point, so we continue to see precipitation falling in that area with generally rain along the coast and snow in the mountains there. Looking at day 1 here, looking at Tuesday, the 22nd, that low pushes into the northwestern portion of the United States, into the Intermountain West as a negatively tilted trough. So it's quite dynamic at this point, although the vorticities are not super powerful at this point in time. We do expect to see quite a bit of snow out there across Montana and Iowa at this point. Still some lingering showers along the west coast there as we continue to get somewhat of a flow off the coast there. And then some snow falling into Utah and portions of Wyoming at this point. A deep surface low begins to form in Nebraska at 996 millibars. Now, whether it forms here or not, I don't know at this point in time. But one of the things we have to be alert to the fact is that this high pressure system is pretty much shutting off the Gulf of Mexico. So not a lot of moisture being flown into this low pressure system at this point in time. And that's going to be one of the factors we're going to have to look at when it comes to severe weather down the road. Looking at Wednesday, now this would be our day 3 that we were looking at earlier, where the slight risk is in effect for pretty much most of Arkansas at this point and into southwest Oklahoma and Texas. We have a very potent upper level low. Now again, I've seen different runs of this that shows a different type of scenario. Some of them show more of an open wave. This one shows more of a closed wave. We'll have to wait and see what really happens that day. But at this point, the GFS is showing a pretty intense low, upper level low forming around Nebraska with a lot of energy on along the frontal boundary that's going to be pushing into Oklahoma, Texas, and parts of Kansas there. Looking at the surface, though, the high pressure system, a lot of it depends upon where this high over the Gulf of Mexico goes. But at this point, the surface chart is showing that the highs moved enough off to the east coast that it's now beginning to push some moisture northward. Now, at this point in time at 18Z, there's not a lot of frontal boundary moisture. We expect this to increase as time goes on, and we could see some thunderstorms begin to form in parts of Missouri, Illinois, maybe down to Arkansas. We'll have to watch this because it just really depends on how this high moves. It is a very powerful low. We do expect blizzard conditions out here in parts of Colorado, Nebraska, and even parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin. It's going to be a fine boundary here. It depends on how high this warm front moves, depending on where the snow rain line forms at this point, and it will be a very potent storm with lots of wind in this area because it's going to be getting down to about 990 millibars. So we'll just have to watch the moisture flow at this point, and I think that's really the limiting factor. The instability is going to be limiting. The shear values are going to be off the charts, but well, not off the charts, but they'll be pretty crazy. But we're just not going to have a lot of instability at this point. Once we get closer to that, we'll have a better idea of what's going on. Looking at Thursday now, this is the day 4, and originally the day 4 had a slight risk for a large portion of Alabama, portions of Mississippi and Georgia and Tennessee. The low becomes kind of disconjointed here as it progresses into the Midwest and not quite as concentrated. So there's not a lot of the upper level forcing is kind of disjointed away from where the slight risk is actually at this point at 18Z. And if we look at the surface conditions, here it shows the surface conditions intensifying with a 988 millibar low centered right over Michigan. Lots of wind with blizzard conditions to the north and showers and thunderstorms extending all the way to the Gulf of Mexico along the frontal boundary. Now we'll have to watch this. Again, the upper level conditions are not crazy looking. It's not really a negative tilted trough. It's more positive and progressive. So that would not scream to me a really major outbreak of severe weather of any sort at this point in time. But again, we're getting into this period now where the model's getting kind of flip-floppy. They're flopping all over the place, and it's hard to really pinpoint what's going on. So it's not really until about day 2 or 3 do we get a better idea of what's going to happen this day. So we'll just need to keep our eyes open and see what happens. Definitely there'll be some showers and thunderstorms. Some of them will get a little crazy at times, but at this point it doesn't look like a major outbreak, but we'll see how things progress. Looking at Friday, flow becomes generally zonal across the United States, so temperatures will remain moderated. No real cold air coming down, except mainly in the northeast. It will still remain cold. There's a little bit of a polar boundary coming down into parts of Montana, so we'll see some cooler temperatures and some snow in that region. If we look at the surface charts, again, we see that deep low from Michigan that rockets into the northeast, and the frontal boundary moves off the coast. High pressure dominates 1024. Some cooler temperatures again back in the east, but nothing super cold like we've seen in the last couple of days. And then a couple low pressure systems in the central plains associated with the energy that's coming in, but nothing major at this point in time. So it's going to remain, the Gulf of Mexico will remain shut off, so won't be a lot of moisture into the central plains and into the Intermountain West. A lot of snow forming there. So looking at Saturday, our last day, this low now actually becomes more split, and a portion of it begins to fall down towards the Four Corners state, which is not a good situation for the southwest as they remain dry, still remain windy, and there's no precipitation really associated with this. It's up the upslope flow into the Colorado, which will produce some snow. If we look at the surface conditions at this point in time, high pressure's now moved off, and now a more general flow off the Gulf of Mexico will begin to take place at this point. So some showers and thunderstorms will form along the southeastern portion of the United States as low pressure begins to form over New Mexico, and a frontal boundary, a kind of a cold, continental frontal boundary moves out of the Canada and brings in some cooler air into the central portion of the United States. We're not going to talk about next week at this point in time, but we'll have to watch where this low begins to develop and form. Some models show that this low actually progresses off the west coast, the southwest, and stalls out and joins with another low. Some of them progresses it eastward, so at this point it's kind of just throwing a quarter up in the air and see where it falls. In general, looking at the week, and as far as precipitation goes, looking at the quantitative precipitation, most of the precipitation in the west will be north of San Francisco to around the Wichita, Kansas area. North of there will be most of the rain. South of there will be pretty dry. And this is not a good situation for drought forming this summer. And I think there might be more of a drought in the Central Plains this year than we've seen. We'll have to monitor that. Because I just don't think we're going to see much precipitation coming in here these next couple of weeks. And it's interesting because the Weather Service climate outlook has recently put a lot of precipitation out here in the Central Plains, but I don't see it happen. I don't see this pattern switching right now at this point in time. Until we see this PDO off the west coast go negative, I don't think we're going to see a lot of precipitation happening over the southwest for a little while, especially in portions of west central portions Texas and Oklahoma, and that they're going to remain pretty dry. Now, looking at the snowfall, and this is the 10-to-1 ratio here of accumulated snowfall. Again, a lot of decent snow out here in the Intermountain West, which is good for filling up reservoirs and everything. And then there's this swath of snow with this next storm system that takes place across Wisconsin in the upper Michigan area into to Canada. But generally south of there, there's not a lot of snow taking place at this point. So let's talk about in summary here. Colder air was replaced by warmer air in the central and eastern United States. We'll see that progress over time. The Southwest will remains rain-free. Again, we won't be seeing rain in the Southwest again for this next 5 days. And then we have the possibility of severe weather Wednesday and Thursday. So again, we'll have to keep our eyes open for those days. At this point in time, the conditions are not really lining up well. It's not a screaming, this is a major severe weather outbreak at this point. But again, models are all over the place. So until we get closer to those days, we won't have a better idea of what the situation's going to be. So we'll keep you posted throughout the day and throughout the rest of this week. We'll definitely be giving you a better idea of what's going to be happening. We thank you for watching and have a great day.